In this video, we're going to look at the roles of the president. The president leads the executive branch. It's also known as POTUS, which is an acronym for President of the United States. The president must be born in the U.S., so they cannot be a naturalized citizen, because remember that a naturalized citizen was born outside of the U.S. and then became a citizen. The president must be born in the U.S. Presidents are elected for 4-year terms, and they can't have more than 2 4-year terms. So the maximum amount of time that a person can be president is 8 years if they are elected for 2 terms. There are 4 main jobs of the president. The president executes and enforces the laws, prepares the annual budget, appoints officials, like for their cabinet or for the Supreme Court, and administers the bureaucracy or oversees the people working in the executive branch. The president is given many powers in their role. One power is the power to enforce or execute the laws. Another one is to prepare the budget. This means that the president has the power to decide what he thinks the government should spend money on. And then later we'll see how Congress gets to approve or deny that budget. The president can appoint judges, ambassadors, and cabinet members. Remember that a cabinet member is somebody who works as an advisor for the president. So the president can appoint or choose the people that work in the Supreme Court, appoint or choose the people that work overseas as ambassadors, and appoint or choose the people that are their advisors in the executive branch. Another power is the power to give the State of the Union address to Congress. Once a year, the president gives this State of the Union address and tells Congress information on what's been happening in the country, and he can recommend laws for the Congress to make at this point. Another power is the power to veto bills. Remember that only Congress can make laws, but the power to veto or sign bills is given to the president. The president is commander-in-chief, which means that he is in command or in control of the U.S. military. And finally, the president can create executive orders. These are kind of like laws, but they weren't made by Congress. An executive order is kind of like a law where it creates rules or regulations for something, but it's not something that goes through Congress. It's something that comes directly from the president. There are checks and balances to limit the power of the branches. So we're going to look at how Congress and the president each have different powers that make this scale stay balanced. In our government, we don't want any of the branches to get too much power. So we use checks and balances to make sure that the power in each branch is balanced. For example, only Congress can pass bills and make laws. But to balance that out, the president can veto or sign those bills. Only the president can prepare or create the budget. But to balance that, Congress has to approve the budget before it's put into place. Only the president can appoint officials. But to balance that, Congress can confirm or deny those appointments. Only the president can propose legislation or say that he thinks something should be a law. But to balance that, Congress has the right to ignore or pass that legislation. Only president has the power to veto bills. But to balance that, Congress can override that veto if 2/3 of Congress votes to make that bill a law. Only Congress has the power to declare war, but to balance that, the president is the commander-in-chief of the military. Congress has the power to impeach the president, the vice president, and other officials, and this means that the Congress can remove these people from office. And the president has the power to give executive orders. So in this scale, we see how we have several checks and balances to make sure that no branch has too much power, and they can always check on what the other branches are doing and make sure that that power balance is balanced. We are going to fill in this part of the notes now that says roles of the president. We are going to go first by filling in the definitions of each of these roles. There are 6 important roles that the president has: chief of state, chief legislator, chief of party, commander-in-chief, chief diplomat, and chief executive. We're going to start by looking at chief of state. As chief of state, the president is the ceremonial and symbolic head of government and nation. Fill that in on your notes now. As chief legislator, the president proposes ideas for laws, like in the State of the Union address, and he can also sign or veto laws. Write that in your notes. As chief of party, the president is the leader and spokesperson of his political party. So right now, our current president, President Joe Biden, is part of the Democratic Party. So he is kind of like the spokesperson for the political party that he's in, the Democratic Party, because of his role as chief of party when he's the president. Write that in your notes now. Commander-in-chief means that the president is the leader of the U.S. armed forces or military. That is something that he is given that power in the Constitution. Write that in your notes. As chief diplomat, the president meets with leaders of other countries, of foreign nations. So if we were going to have a meeting between the United States and Great Britain, the president would be the person that meets with the leader of Great Britain, the Queen, because of his role as chief diplomat. And then chief executive means that the president is the leader of the executive branch. Make sure that you have filled in all of these blanks before we move on. Next, we're going to look at how to fill in these little thought bubbles. And I want you to use what you wrote in your notes to figure out what might go in the thought bubble for each of these roles. And I'm going to use this middle one as an example, chief legislator. As the chief legislator, the president proposes ideas for laws, and he can sign or veto laws. So the president sitting in the White House might say, because of this role, I can determine which bills become laws. I used my notes and explanation for that role to figure out what the president might say about having that role. You on your notes are going to fill in these 6 thought bubbles before you're finished with this activity. You can either write what I put on mine, because of this role I can determine which bills become laws, or you can come up with your own for that one. But at this point, the video is going to pause, and I would like for you to fill in these 6 spots. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching.